Mia Alvarez was 25, slinging hot dogs from her little red cart on a side street just off the chaos of the Las Vegas Strip. It was a familiar scene. Tourists wandering by, clutching neon-colored drinks, the dazzling lights of the casinos painting the night sky. Everything felt completely normal, just another late shift, till suddenly it wasn't. It was around 10:45 p.m. when Mia first noticed it. A black SUV, parked deep in the shadows right behind her cart. The engine was off. The windows were so tinted you couldn't see a thing inside, and there was no movement, not a single sign of life. At first, she just shrugged it off. This was Vegas, after all. Weird was the baseline. But every time she risked a glance over her shoulder, the SUV was still there, still silent, still watching. She tried to push the feeling down, focusing on scrubbing the grill, wiping down the counters. She told herself she was just tired, that her imagination was running wild. It's easy to get spooked when you're working alone at night. No matter how much she tried to rationalize it, a cold knot of dread was tightening in her stomach. It's that primal instinct, the one that screams when something is truly deeply wrong, was getting louder and louder. Tonight was different. The minutes crawled by like hours. She served a couple of late-night partiers, forcing a smile, her hands trembling slightly as she handed them their food. With each customer, she hoped the SUV would just drive away, that it was all a strange coincidence. But it remained a dark, unmoving predator in the periphery. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about calling her friend, maybe her dad, but what would she even say? There's a car parked behind me? It sounded paranoid. Then, a flicker of movement. The driver's side door of the SUV creaked open. Mia froze, her breath catching in her throat. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to swallow the dim light. He didn't look at her, not at first. Instead, he just stood by the open door, his head slowly scanning the empty street. It was the kind of deliberate, patient movement that sent shivers down her spine. He wasn't a customer, wasn't lost. He finally turned his head, and his eyes locked onto her. Even from a distance, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. It was cold, calculating. There was no emotion in it, just an unnerving focus. He took a slow step towards her cart, then another. Mia's mind raced. Should she scream? Run? But where could she go? She was surrounded by the concrete jungle of Vegas, a place where screams could easily be mistaken for sounds of celebration. The man kept walking, his steps steady and unhurried. Wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. He was closing the distance, and with every footstep, the bubble of Mia's world shrank until it was just her little red cart, and the approaching shadow. She gripped the metal edge of her cart, her knuckles turning white. This was it, the moment her gut had been warning her about. He stopped just a few feet away, standing on the other side of her cart. The faint sizzle of the grill was the only sound between them. He wasn't looking at the hot dogs or the menu. He was looking right through her. "Mia Alvarez?" he asked. His voice was low, gravelly, and sent a fresh wave of terror through her. How did he know her name? Her business was registered, sure, but no one ever used her full name, ever. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket. Ash! Mia's mind flashed with every horror movie scenario she'd ever seen. She braced herself, her eyes squeezed shut. But instead of what she feared, he pulled out a worn, slightly crumpled photograph and slid it across the stainless steel counter towards her. "Have you seen this man?" he asked. Mia cautiously opened her eyes. She looked down at the photo. It was a picture of a man in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him. She shook her head. "No, I don't think so. I see a lot of people." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Look again," he commanded, his voice sharp. "He would have been around here. Maybe a few weeks ago." "His name is Marco." Mia stared at the photo again, her mind frantically searching. Marco. The name didn't ring a bell, but the face. There was something about the eyes, and it hit her. It wasn't a customer. She remembered seeing him one night, not buying anything, just looking lost. Been sitting on the curb a little ways down the street, looking heartbroken. She had felt a pang of sympathy, and had taken him a bottle of water and a hot dog on the house. He'd barely spoken, just mumbled a thank you and looked down at his hands. "I think I saw him once," Mia said, her voice shaking. He was just sitting over there. He looked sad. I gave him some water. The man's expression shifted. The hard edges softened, just a fraction. "He's my father," he said, his voice now laced with a different emotion. "He disappeared 3 weeks ago. He has early onset Alzheimer's. He gets confused. He wanders." He looked at Mia. And for the first time, she saw not a predator, but a desperate son. "You're the first person who's seen him since he left home. The very first lead we have." Relief washed over Mia so intensely her knees felt weak. He wasn't here to hurt her. He was searching for his father. The black SUV, the intense stare, the late-night visit, it all suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. He was a man on a mission, operating on fear and adrenaline. "I'm so sorry," Mia said, her voice full of genuine sympathy. "I only saw him that one time. He didn't say where he was going or anything." The man, whose name she later learned was David, nodded slowly. He looked exhausted, the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He took out his phone. "Can I take your number, just in case you remember anything else? Anything at all?" Mia quickly gave him her number. As he turned to leave, he paused. "I'm sorry if I scared you," he said, looking genuinely apologetic. "I've been driving around for weeks, showing his picture to anyone who works the late shift." You start to lose hope. He got back into the black SUV and drove away, disappearing back into the city lights. Mia stood there for a long time, her heart still beating fast, but for a completely different reason. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound sense of sadness and a strange connection to the two men. The night, which had started with a feeling of impending doom, had ended with a stark reminder of the hidden stories that walk the streets of Vegas every single night. A few days later, Mia got a text. It was from David. It was a picture of him with his arm around the man from the photograph, Marco. They were both smiling. The text underneath read, "We found him. He was in a shelter a few miles from your cart. Thank you. You gave us the hope to keep looking." Mia looked at the photo, a smile spreading across her face. In a city known for its illusions and games of chance, she had played a small part in a real-life story of loss and reunion. And as she fired up the grill for another night's work, the lights of the Las Vegas Strip seemed to shine a little bit brighter, a little warmer than before. Her little red cart wasn't just a spot to sell hot dogs. It was a tiny beacon in the vast, lonely desert night. It was almost 11:15, a time when the city's pulse slows to a steady, quiet hum. For Mia, behind her hot dog cart, it was the winding down of another long shift. The air, thick with the lingering scent of grilled onions and sizzling sausages, was starting to cool. Most of her customers by this hour were tourists, their speech slurred with late-night revelry, their laughter echoing a little too loudly in the emptying streets. They'd stumble up, order, and move on, a predictable rhythm to the end of her night. But tonight, that rhythm was about to be broken. A man approached the cart. He was tall, his frame swallowed by a black hoodie pulled low over his face, casting his features in deep shadow. His hands were stuffed deep into his pockets. Unlike the swaying tourists and boisterous locals, he moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose. He didn't look drunk. In fact, he didn't look like he was here for a hot dog at all. He stopped at the counter, his presence a sudden, sharp note in the otherwise mellow night. "Busy night?" he asked. His voice was low, a quiet rumble that barely carried over the city's distant sounds, but it cut through the air with unnerving clarity. His eyes, dark and unreadable, never left her face. There was an intensity in his gaze that made the hairs on Mia's arms stand up. A professional mask slipped into place. She forced a polite smile, the kind she gave to hundreds of customers a week. "Not really," she replied, her voice lighter than she felt, almost closing time. She expected him to order, to ask for extra mustard or no onions, to do something normal. But he didn't. The man just stood there, a silent statue in the dim glow of her cart's light. The silence stretched, becoming heavy and uncomfortable. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a few seconds. His gaze dropped from her face to her hands. Watching her as she methodically started her closing routine, wiping down the stainless steel counter, stacking the napkin dispensers, consolidating her condiments. Every simple, practiced movement felt scrutinized, magnified under his silent watch. Finally, after what felt like an age, he turned. Without another word, He walked back toward a dark SUV parked further down the street, almost completely swallowed by the shadows of a large oak tree. The vehicle was nondescript, the kind you'd see 100 times a day and never notice. He opened the passenger door and disappeared inside. The door clicked shut, a final definitive sound in the quiet night. The SUV didn't start its engine, it just sat there, a dark, hulking shape in the gloom. Mia froze, a wet cloth still in her hand. Her heart, which had been hammering a nervous rhythm against her ribs, now felt like it was trying to beat its way out of her chest. This wasn't a random late-night wanderer. This wasn't a tourist looking for a cheap meal. This felt different. This felt wrong. Cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into her veins. The man, the hoodie, the silent stare, the waiting SUV, the pieces clicked together into a picture she didn't want to see. This was planned. Her hands trembled as she pulled her phone from her back pocket. Her fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled to type a message to her roommate. "Sarah, closing up now. Be home soon." A simple message. A normal message. A lie to reassure herself as much as her friend. She hit send, the blue bubble popping up on her screen. She shoved the phone back into her pocket and tried to focus. Her movements now rushed, frantic. She just wanted to pack up, get in her car and get home. She wanted to lock the door behind her and forget the man in the black hoodie. But as she hurriedly threw the last of her supplies into their containers, a chilling realization washed over her. Oh. She didn't know it yet, but that simple text message would be the last thing she ever sent. The world would keep turning. The city would wake up tomorrow. But for Mia, the night had just come to a final, terrifying end. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of her alarm, not the familiar clatter of Mia returning home. Mia's side of the small apartment was untouched. Her bed was perfectly made, just as she'd left it yesterday. A quick check of her phone showed Sarah the message from Mia, sent at 11:21 p.m. "Closing up now, be home soon." But Mia wasn't home. Sarah called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. She called again and again. Voicemail panic began to set in. This wasn't like Mia. Mia was reliable, predictable. She would always call if she was going to be late. Sarah called the police. She explained the situation, her voice shaking. The officer on the other end was calm, perhaps too calm. He took down the details: Mia's name, description, her last known location. He talked about the 24-hour waiting period for missing persons, standard procedure. But Sarah knew. She knew something was terribly wrong. Standard procedure wasn't going to be fast enough. Detective Harding was assigned the case. He was a veteran, a man who had seen the city's underbelly more times than he cared to remember. He'd learned to trust his gut, and right now his gut was screaming that this wasn't just a girl who decided not to come home. He went to the spot where Mia's cart was usually parked. The space was empty, but the pavement held faint, greasy stains, ghosts of 1,000 hot dogs. He interviewed the owners of the nearby shops. Few remembered seeing Mia closing up, but no one saw anything unusual. Then he found a security camera on a corner deli, angled just right. The footage was grainy, the timestamp glowing in the corner. He watched as Mia went about her work. He saw the tourists, the late-night walkers, and then, at 11:14 p.m., he saw him. The tall figure in the black hoodie. Harding leaned closer to the monitor. He watched the silent, tense exchange. He saw the man walk away, get into a dark SUV. He zoomed in on the vehicle, trying to get a plate number, but the angle and the darkness made it impossible. It was just a black smudge. The footage continued. He saw Mia on her phone, then her rushed packing. Then, just as she was about to close the final compartment of her cart, the SUV's headlights flashed once. Two more figures, also in dark clothing, emerged from the alleyway behind the cart. It was fast. It was brutally efficient. There was no struggle, no sound that would have carried. One moment Mia was there, and the next she was gone. The cart was hitched to the SUV, and the vehicle pulled away, melting back into the city's dark streets. Harding felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't a simple abduction. This was organized, professional. The hot dog cart. Why take the cart? It wasn't about ransom. It was about erasure. They didn't just take Mia. They took every trace of her existence from that corner. He went back to Mia and Sarah's apartment. He needed to know more about the victim. Who was Mia? Did she have enemies? Was she involved in something she shouldn't have been? Sarah, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed, led him to Mia's room. It was simple, neat, a stack of novels on the nightstand, a few framed photos on the wall, Mia with Sarah, Mia with her parents. Nothing seemed out of place. But Harding knew that secrets often hide in plain sight. He carefully looked through her laptop. Emails, social media, browsing history, it all painted a picture of a normal young woman working hard to make ends meet. And then he found it. Buried in a folder labeled College Papers was a single document titled Ledger. It wasn't a school project. It was a meticulously kept record of names, dates, and numbers. Large sums of money. Harding recognized some of the names: local politicians, businessmen, figures known to operate in the city's gray areas. And next to each transaction was a location, a time, and a brief coded note. Many of the locations were public parks, quiet street corners, places where a hot dog cart wouldn't seem out of place. Mia wasn't just selling hot dogs, her cart was a mobile dead drop. She was a courier, a cog in a much larger machine. She was moving money or something more for some very powerful people. The man in the hoodie wasn't a random predator. He was a message. Or worse, he was housekeeping. The investigation now had a direction, but it was a dangerous one. These weren't common criminals. The names in that ledger were connected, powerful, and protected. Harding knew that pushing this would be like poking a hornet's nest. His superiors warned him to be careful. But looking at the smiling photo of Mia on the wall, he knew he couldn't let it go. She wasn't just a name in a ledger or a grainy figure on a security tape. She was a young woman whose life was stolen from her, and he was going to find out why. He had to follow the money. His first stop was the first name on the list, a prominent real estate developer with a squeaky clean public image, and Harding suspected a very dirty secret life. The mystery of what happened to Mia was just the tip of the iceberg, and Harding was about to dive into the freezing, dark water beneath. The city was holding its breath, and the truth was buried somewhere in its shadows, waiting to be uncovered. Mia folded the cart, the metallic click echoing in the near-empty street. She locked it securely to a street post, a familiar routine at the end of a long day. The once bustling Las Vegas sidewalk was now a quiet, deserted stretch of concrete under the dim glow of the streetlights. She took a moment, listening to the distant hum of the city, before slipping her day's earnings into her backpack. The worn straps felt heavy on her shoulders as she began the walk toward her car, parked a seemingly safe 3 blocks away. The first block passed without incident. The air was cool, a welcome relief after the desert heat. As she started down the second, she heard a faint sound, almost imperceptible. Footsteps, they were behind her. Slow at first, a casual, unhurried pace that could have been anyone. Mia picked up her own pace slightly, a small knot of unease tightening in her stomach. The footsteps behind her matched her new speed, and they quickened, faster than faster still, breaking into a run. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Adrenaline surged through her veins. She spun around, her long hair whipping across her face. Nothing. The street behind her was empty. Sidewalk stretched back, illuminated by the lonely streetlights. But there was no one there. She stood frozen for a second, her breath catching in her throat. Was she just tired? Was her mind playing tricks on her? She told herself to calm down, that it was just the late hour getting to her. She turned back, ready to dismiss the feeling, when a shape detached itself from the deeper shadows of an alleyway. A massive black SUV rolled silently toward her, its headlights off, a predator gliding through the urban jungle. It was unnervingly quiet, its engine a loper that was swallowed by the vastness of the night. Before she could even process the danger, before her mind could scream at her legs to move, the side door flew open with a hydraulic hiss. 2 figures, clad in black from head to toe, their faces obscured by ski masks, leaped out. They moved with a terrifying, practiced speed. "Mia, run." The words screamed inside her head, a desperate, silent plea. But her feet felt like they were bolted to the pavement. A primal fear, cold and absolute, had paralyzed her. She was a statue, a spectator to her own nightmare. A rough-gloved hand clamped hard over her mouth, stifling the scream that was just beginning to form. The sudden force made her drop her backpack. It hit the ground with a soft thud. Her phone, dislodged from her pocket by the impact, slid across the pavement, its screen momentarily catching the dim light before disappearing into the darkness near the curb. Her last connection to the world, gone. She struggled, kicking and twisting, but it was useless. Their grip was like iron. She was lifted off her feet, a feeling of weightlessness followed by sheer terror as she was dragged, kicking and flailing toward the waiting vehicle. They bundled her into the dark interior of the SUV, the smell of leather and something metallic filling her nostrils. The heavy door slammed shut, the sound final and absolute. The quiet Las Vegas streets swallowed the noise whole, as if nothing had ever happened. The black SUV, still without its headlights, pulled away from the curb and vanished back into the night, leaving behind an empty sidewalk, a discarded backpack, and a profound, chilling silence. Inside, darkness enveloped her. Her eyes struggled to adjust, but there was little light to be found. The windows were heavily tinted, turning the city lights into blurry, indistinct streaks of color as the vehicle picked up speed. Her heart was a wild drum against her ribs, the adrenaline from her initial shock now giving way to a tidal wave of panic. She was blindfolded, the rough fabric scratching against her skin. Her wrists were bound tightly behind her back with what felt like zip ties, the plastic biting into her flesh. She tried to listen, to gather any clue about where they were going. The hum of the engine, the feel of the turns, the occasional bump of an uneven road. They were moving fast, weaving through traffic with an unnerving confidence. Were they still in the city? Were they heading out into the desert? Every possibility that flashed through her mind was more terrifying than the last. Who were these people? What did they want? As the questions swirled in a chaotic vortex with no answers in sight, she focused on her breathing, trying to follow the advice she'd seen in movies, trying to stay calm and observant. But it was hard when every nerve ending was screaming in terror. She could feel the presence of at least two other people in the vehicle besides the driver. They weren't speaking. The silence was more menacing than any threat could have been. It was a cold, calculated silence that spoke of professionalism, of a plan being executed flawlessly. Mia thought about her life, the simple, predictable routine she had built for herself in Vegas. The small apartment, the job she didn't love but that paid the bills, the few friends she met for coffee. It all felt like a lifetime away now, a different world she had been violently ripped from. She thought about her car, still parked 3 blocks probably miles away by now, waiting for a driver who would never arrive. After what felt like an eternity, the SUV slowed down. The smooth ride turned bumpy, the tires crunching over what sounded like gravel. They were off the main roads. The vehicle came to a stop. The engine was cut, plunging them into an even deeper silence, broken only by Mia's own ragged breathing. A door opened, and cool night air, carrying the scent of dust and sagebrush, flooded the confined space. The desert. One of her captors grabbed her arm, his grip firm and impersonal, pulled her out of the SUV. Her bare feet touched the cold, uneven ground. She stumbled, her legs still weak with fear. They half-dragged, half-walked her a short distance. The sound of a heavy metal door groaning open echoed in the stillness. She was pushed forward, into a space that smelled of damp earth and stale air. The metal door clanged shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the small space. A lock clicked into place. Then footsteps receded, the SUV's engine roared back to life, and the sound of the vehicle driving away faded into the vast, empty expanse of the desert night. She was alone, completely and utterly alone in the suffocating darkness. The blindfold was still tight, the zip ties still biting into her wrists. She tried to call out, but her throat was raw and only a hoarse croak emerged. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her again. She forced it down, taking a deep, shuddering breath. Panicking wouldn't help. She had to think. She had to survive. She shuffled her feet, trying to get a sense of her surroundings. The floor was cold, hard concrete. She took a tentative step forward, and her shoulder brushed against a rough, cinder block wall. She followed the wall, her hands still bound behind her, tracing the perimeter of her prison. It was a small room, a cell. Tears of frustration and fear welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. She needed to be strong. She needed to find a way out. She began testing the zip ties, pulling and twisting her wrists, hoping to find a weak point, a way to loosen them. The plastic cut deeper, but she ignored the pain. It was a reminder that she was still alive, still fighting. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. In the absolute darkness, time had lost all meaning. Her initial terror had subsided into a grim resolve. It was MIA. She wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor. They had taken her, but they hadn't broken her. Not yet. She would wait, she would listen, and she would find her chance. And when that chance came, she would be ready. The silence of the desert held her captive, but within that silence, a spark of defiance began to glow. They had made a mistake. They had underestimated her. She would make them regret it. By Wednesday morning, Mia's roommate knew in her gut that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a late night out, not even for Vegas. Mia hadn't come home. She hadn't sent a single text, not even a quick "hey, staying out." Her phone, when her roommate tried calling, just rang and rang before going to voicemail. Her messages, unread. It was like she had vanished into thin air. A knot of dread tightened in her roommate's stomach. She rushed outside. Mia's old, reliable sedan was still parked right where she'd left it before her shift, untouched. The roommate then hurried towards the strip, her heart pounding with every step. And there it was. Mia's hot dog cart locked securely to the same street sign near the casino entrance. Everything was in its place. The condiment bottles were neatly arranged. The grill was wiped clean, just as Mia always left it. It was as if she had just stepped away for a moment, planning to come right back, but she never did. The panic was undeniable now. This was a missing person. The police were called immediately. Detectives arrived on the scene, their faces serious, taking in the bizarre situation. A young woman, a popular street vendor, gone without a trace. Her belongings, her car, her entire livelihood, all left behind. It didn't make any sense. Their first move was to canvass the area for any security footage. In a city like Las Vegas, cameras are everywhere, watching everything, silent witnesses to the chaos and the quiet moments alike. The detectives began the painstaking process of collecting and reviewing hours upon hours of footage from the nearby casinos, hotels, and traffic cameras. They watched the endless river of life on the Strip. Crowds of tourists laughing and stumbling along the sidewalk, taxis and limousines rushing by in a blur of motion. The overwhelming glare of neon lights that turned night into a surreal, artificial day. It was like searching for a single grain of sand on an endless beach. Most of the footage showed nothing out of the ordinary, just the typical rhythm of a Tuesday night in Vegas. People coming and going, a constant flow of humanity. But the detectives were trained to spot the anomaly, the one thing that doesn't fit. They fast-forwarded, rewound, and squinted at grainy images, their eyes scanning for any sign of Mia after her shift was supposed to have ended. They followed the timeline minute by agonizing minute. 11:15 p.m., Mia is seen cleaning her cart. 11:20 p.m., she locks it up. 11:25 p.m., she seems to be looking at her phone, and then nothing. For several minutes, she's just off camera, in a blind spot between two different angles. And then finally, a breakthrough. One camera, mounted high on a pole across the street, caught something. It was a secondary angle, partially obscured by a palm tree, but it showed the narrow alleyway right behind where Mia's cart was parked. The timestamp on the footage read 11:32 p.m. From the deep shadows of the alley, a vehicle emerged. It was a large black SUV. The first thing the detectives noticed was that its headlights were off. It moved with a strange, almost predatory slowness, completely out of place with the frenetic pace of the surrounding traffic. The windows were tinted so dark, they were like black mirrors, reflecting the neon chaos, but revealing nothing of what or who was inside. The SUV didn't speed away. It moved deliberately, easing out of the alley and into the flow of traffic, becoming just another anonymous vehicle in a sea of lights. But in seconds, it had blended in completely and disappeared down the boulevard. The detectives paused the video. They zoomed in, enhancing the image as much as they could. They replayed the short clip over and over again, but it was a ghost. There was no license plate visible, not even a partial, no distinguishing marks, no dents, no stickers, nothing that could be used to identify it. It was a professional, sterile disappearance. The chilling reality began to set in. Mia hadn't just gotten lost or decided to take an impromptu trip. This wasn't a case of a young person getting swept up in the Vegas nightlife. The pristine cart, the untouched car, and now this phantom SUV all painted a terrifying picture. She had been taken, abducted, and it was done with a level of precision and cleanliness that sent a shiver down the spine of even the most seasoned investigators. There was no struggle visible on camera, no witnesses who reported a scream, nothing to suggest a fight. It was quiet, efficient, and horrifyingly professional. Someone had watched Mia. They knew her routine. They knew the blind spots in the camera coverage. They knew exactly when and how to strike. As the sun rose over Las Vegas on Wednesday, the search for Mia had transformed from a missing person case into a full-blown abduction investigation. The question was no longer just where is Mia? It was who took her and why. The police set up a command center and launched a media blitz. Mia's face was suddenly everywhere, on local news channels, on social media, on digital billboards along the same strip where she had vanished. Her story resonated with the city. She was one of their own, a hardworking young woman with a dream, a familiar, friendly face to countless locals and tourists. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Fellow food truck owners and street vendors organized search parties, combing through the back alleys and side streets of the city, their own fear mingling with a fierce determination to find her. They shared stories of Mia's kindness, her infectious laugh, her generosity. She was the one who would give a free hot dog to a homeless person who always had a kind word for a fellow vendor struggling to make it through a slow night. She was part of the fabric of the city's unsung workforce. Detectives, meanwhile, dug deeper into Mia's life, desperate to find a motive, a lead, anything. They interviewed her roommate, her family back home, her friends, even her regular customers. They were looking for any hint of trouble, a disgruntled ex-boyfriend, a secret debt, an argument with another vendor, but everyone told the same story. Mia was universally loved. She was sweet, responsible, and had no known enemies. She was focused on saving money to open her own small restaurant one day. Her life seemed completely ordinary, which made her extraordinary disappearance all the more baffling. There was no apparent reason why anyone would target her. This lack of motive was perhaps the most frightening part. It suggested a randomness, a predator who chose her not for who she was, but simply because she was there, a target of opportunity. The investigation into the black SUV hit one dead end after another. The city's vast network of traffic cameras was checked for any sign of the vehicle, but it was like it had driven into a black hole. With no license plate, tracking it was nearly impossible. Detectives considered the possibility that it was a rental, or had stolen plates, or was even brought into the city specifically for this purpose, and was now long gone. They looked into every reported black SUV of that model in the state, a monumental task that yielded thousands of potential vehicles. Each one had to be checked and cleared. The days turned into a week, and the hope that had initially surged through the community began to curdle into a grim fear. The search parties grew smaller. The news cycle moved on to other stories. Dumb, but for Mia's family and friends, and for the detectives working the case, the world had stopped on that Tuesday night. The lead detective on the case, a man named Henderson, who had seen the darkest sides of Vegas for 20 years, couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. It wasn't a crime of passion or a robbery gone wrong. The precision of it all spoke to a level of sophistication that was rare. He kept going back to the video, watching the black SUV emerge from the alley, that deliberate, unhurried exit. It wasn't the move of a panicked kidnapper. It was the move of someone who was confident, in control, and utterly certain they would not be caught. It was the move of a professional. Henderson started to explore a darker, more terrifying theory. Was Mia targeted by an organization? A criminal syndicate involved in something far more sinister than a simple abduction. It was a path of investigation that led into the shadowy underbelly of the city, a world of high-stakes crime that operated far from the bright lights of the casinos, a world where people could be made to disappear cleanly, quietly, and forever. As the investigation continued, the neon glow of Las Vegas, once a symbol of dreams and excitement for Mia, now seemed to cast a dark and menacing shadow over the entire city. The search for Mia wasn't just a search for a missing person anymore. It was a race against time, a desperate attempt to pull her back from an abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. Thursday afternoon brought a break in the case, a sliver of hope from an unexpected source. A truck driver, hauling supplies on the outskirts of Las Vegas, was taking a short rest when he heard something that made the hairs on his arm stand up. It was faint, carried on the wind, but he was almost certain, the sound of a woman's voice. Echoing from a cluster of abandoned warehouses nearby. He didn't hesitate, he called it in. Detectives raced to the scene, their tires kicking up dust as they pulled into the desolate industrial park. The place was eerily silent. The only sounds were the wind whistling through gaps in rusted metal walls and the crunch of their own boots on sand-dusted concrete. It felt like a ghost town, a place where secrets go to die. They began a systematic search, warehouse by warehouse, hoping for something, anything that could lead them to Mia. Then, in one of the larger structures, they found it. The first sign was the tire tracks, fresh in the thick layer of dust on the floor. These weren't old marks left by forgotten machinery. They were recent. Someone had driven a vehicle in and out of this building and not long ago. The air felt heavy with unspoken events. As they moved deeper inside, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, the discoveries became more and more chilling. Lying near a stack of collapsed shelving was a piece of rope. It was thick, coarse, and one end had strands that were frayed and pulled loose, as if something or someone had struggled against it. It was a sinister object, one that told a story of restraint and a desperate fight for freedom. A few feet away, another item caught their eye. A black disposable face mask, just like the ones millions of people wear every day. But here, in this abandoned place, it felt out of place, a modern artifact in a scene of decay. It could have been dropped by anyone, but in the context of a kidnapping, it was a potential piece of evidence, possibly belonging to a suspect or even to Mia herself. The detectives documented everything, their faces grim. The tension in the warehouse was palpable. Could almost feel the echoes of what had happened there. They continued their search, their movements slow and deliberate, checking every dark corner, every pile of rubble. And that's when they found the most heart-wrenching clue of all. Half hidden under a pile of debris, as if someone had tried to kick it out of sight, was a backpack. It was unmistakably Mia's. Her family had described it in detail, the small keychain hanging from the zipper, the unique pattern on the fabric. Seeing it there, discarded on the dirty floor, made their stomachs drop. The zipper was torn open, its teeth mangled. One of the shoulder straps had been snapped completely, the frayed ends showing signs of immense force, as if it had been yanked violently from her shoulder. The bag itself was a testament to a struggle. This was no accidental misplacement. This was proof. Mia had been here. The detectives' hearts pounded in their chests. They were on the right trail. Everything inside the warehouse suggested she had been there very, very recently. The patterns in the dust on the floor weren't random. They showed signs of hurried movement, a chaotic dance of activity. They could make out different sets of footprints, overlapping and scuffed. And then, the most disturbing marks of all, drag marks. Long, straight lines in the dust, indicating that someone had been pulled unwillingly across the concrete floor. The scene painted a terrifying picture, a struggle, a capture, and a swift departure. But there were no bodies. There were no vehicles left behind. And most importantly, there was no Mia. She was gone. The chilling realization began to sink in. The kidnappers were not amateurs. They were mobile, organized, and terrifyingly careful. They had moved Mia before the police arrived, possibly just minutes after the truck driver made his crucial phone call. They were always one step ahead. This abandoned warehouse was the first real, tangible clue they had in the desperate search for Mia. It confirmed she was alive, at least when she was brought here. It gave them a location, a place to start processing for forensic evidence like fingerprints or DNA. But it also revealed the terrifying efficiency of her captors. They had a plan, and they were executing it flawlessly. For the detectives, the discovery was a double-edged sword. It brought them closer to the truth, but it also widened the gap between them and Mia. She wasn't just missing anymore. She was in the hands of a professional and ruthless group. The vast, unforgiving desert of Nevada stretched out in every direction, a landscape with a million places to hide. The warehouse was a single dot on an enormous map, a starting point in a race against time. The trail was hot, but it was also cold. Mia was still out there somewhere, and the clock was ticking louder than ever. The search had just become infinitely more urgent and infinitely more dangerous. Thank you for watching. If you have any information related to this or any other case, please contact your local authorities. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates as we continue to follow this developing story. Stay safe out there.